I'm going to talk a little bit now about the values and behaviors, and I'm going to walk through how to define those. And I'm going to give you a quick 9 steps. For those of you who want, I actually have a one-pager. If you follow me and DM me, I'm happy to send that to you. It goes into much more detail about how to do what I'm going to talk about, and even talks about some of the behavioral criteria, specifically how to make sure that you come up with behaviors that are global, that everybody can understand. So these are the 9 steps that you need to do that I have seen really work well, both inside companies and as a consultant working with a number of companies now. So the first thing is connecting. It's really, your values, as you know, is a top-down, bottom-up approach. You need to have executive buy-in, and you need to have, ideally, employees co-create this opportunity with you. So I think it's really important to make sure that both sides are in this whole process. You need to do an audit, a cultural audit. What's already in the building? Are there words that are being used a lot? Are people talking about certain things? When things are going well, what is happening? When things are not going well, what is happening? So really looking around and identifying and doing your own audit from your own cultural audit. Curate, there's that word again. I am a big fan of 3s, maybe 5s, but not having a lot of values. So many companies have like 10 or more values, and then they have behavioral statements underneath that. So it ends up being like 25, 35, 40 different statements, and we spend more time trying to remember them than trying to figure out how we integrate them into our daily experience. So, and I know, for myself, if it goes past 3, I'm trying to figure it out. So one of our jobs is to make sure that we're curating and culling it down. And it's not to say, I get so many questions of, well, we believe in, 20 different things. That's great. But it's not, those are assumptions. These are the unique and different values that are special to your organization. Iterate, you keep iterating on what you're hearing, and again, that has a lot to do with the curation. You finally define them, and then you figure out a way to communicate them. And I think this is really important. And one of the things that I've done a lot in the past that works well is that you don't just communicate them and on values and posters and have a big marketing launch. You communicate them with an example of how they're going to be integrated or operationalized. So a lot of companies will communicate their values, but then they'll give examples of how those are going to be integrated into the interview process. So people are already starting to realize, oh, okay, this is not just another HR initiative with a bunch of posters on the wall. This is actually something that we're going to use and that is going to be helpful to us. And then how do you continue to integrate that? So not just in the interview process, but in the promotion process, how you recognize employees, how you develop employees. Again, tying those behaviors into specific skill sets is really important. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about how we iterated values at Adobe. But I think, again, while values and behaviors, they don't get changed as much as our strategy, I think that one of the myths out there is that they never get changed. Like, oh my God, it's so much pressure, because once you create values, you're done. You can't do anything else. That is not true. We keep evolving as organizations, and now we're going through so much more change. You have to keep reviewing your values to make sure that they're being expressed and they're the expectations that you're continuing to have. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we did this at Adobe, and I actually was part of the values either creation process or iteration for all 3 companies that I worked inside of. And at Adobe, I was there, it was about 25 years old when I started working for that company, so it had been around for a while, very established company. And we had, at the time, 9 core values, a lot, too many, with some beliefs and behaviors behind them. They were good. They actually were, I would say, better than most companies. But we were going through so much change. We were acquiring a lot of companies. We just got a new CEO, shot new. We were actually looking at how do we think about our product differently. So Adobe used to just be in boxes, and that's what we sold. We started to think about, now we're moving more into the cloud. Like how is that changing some things? So a lot of things were changing the business. And then from a leadership perspective, we were getting a lot of different requests from the leaders in terms of what you were talking about before, about technical skill sets as well as some of the softer skills. So it was a time of inflection for us, and we knew that we needed to kind of make sure that these were either still the values or we were going to iterate on them. So we did those 9 steps. Maybe not all 9, but we did a version of those 9 steps. We worked with the executive team. We worked with a lot of focus groups globally. And what was interesting about this is that the branding team, marketing team, was doing this as well with our customers. So they were going out and asking our customers, what do you think of Adobe? Like when you think about Adobe, what do you think of our company? What are some words that come up? What's your experience? And so our 2 teams came together one day, and the brand team came to us and they said, you know, we have curated all of the content. We've culled it down to 4. That's a magic number from 9. And these were the 4 values that they came to us with. It was genuine, innovative, exceptional, and involved. And it was a very aha moment for us as an HR team because we looked at it and said, wow, those are very similar to what we were hearing from employees. So we didn't quite know what to do with that. And then we realized one of our values was genuine. Wouldn't it be great if the customer experience was the same as the employee experience? And shouldn't that really be how it should be? So we ended up using these 4 values, they were originally marketing attributes, as our values for Adobe. And 10 years later, those are still the values for Adobe, and they've integrated them into all of their people processes and how they're working every day. So values are not static. They're something that you need to continue to look at over time, especially as your companies are going through a lot of change. So the other piece I want to talk about just briefly is the practices part of culture. And so a lot of you probably have company meetings or all-hands meetings, as we call them in Silicon Valley. And these are a great practice. It's a great way to connect people from all over the organization, around the world. People look forward to this opportunity every time to kind of hear from leaders and hear from each other. And when you're first starting these all-hands, they could be 10 people, 20 people in a startup. On a Friday afternoon, you have a beer or tea. We actually called our all-hands at Twitter tea time. Don't exactly know where that came from, but I think it's because people had tea as well. And then over time, we realized, and I'll just show you a photo of where this took place. So this is Twitter headquarters in the main area where we would have our company meetings. And we realized over time that even though we wanted to keep the essence of this practice, this was not okay for people in London. So when we had the Friday afternoon meetings at 3, it was already evening in London. They were already starting their weekend. And it was Saturday morning in Tokyo. So it just did not work as a global practice. And so we had to iterate on that practice. We moved it to a different day. We moved the times. We did mornings. We did afternoons. And we actually did not have everything come from headquarters. So we rotated hosts. And sometimes London hosted, sometimes Tokyo hosted, different parts of the world hosted. And we also had a theme every week where we would talk about a value or behavior that we wanted to emphasize, and examples of what that looked like or what somebody did that week that showcased that particular value. So it was a great opportunity to integrate our culture into a practice that we were doing, and we were conscious of how that practice gets changed over time. Okay, so we just talked about work as a learning system. We specifically talked about how learning connects strategy and culture. We talked about creating values and behaviors. We talked about iteration and the importance of that with Adobe as an example. And then I just shared with you a little bit about some cultural practices that we've done with Twitter specifically and Tea Time.